Hello, my friends, and welcome back. Thank you very much for being with me again today. The Ukrainians and some in the West say that you have to have a complete ceasefire first in Ukraine and then negotiate. You can't have a war and negotiate in the same time. I claimed many times that this statement is baboonish, not only a lie, but it happened before and it has been done even by the Americans for some time. I have a video clip here, it's about 6 minutes, where we have Vladimir Medinsky, who was the chief negotiator for the Russian delegation in Istanbul on the 15th of 16th of May. The delegations, the Ukrainian delegations and Russian delegations met. And he's going to explain, he's a historian, and he's one of the primary aides for AIDS, not AIDS like HIV, for Vladimir Putin, or of Vladimir Putin. And he's going to explain two things. One, it's been done before, and he's going to give an example, not only, more than one examples, when in history it's been done, including Napoleon Bonaparte said, we have war and then in the same time we negotiate. We don't have to have a ceasefire. And not only that, he's going to give the example with the Swedes, he's going to give the Vietnam War, he's going to give with the Turks in the 19th century, 1875, 76, 77, those kind of incidents. And this very smart Medinsky is going to point out who was behind this. We're going to help you fight until the end, all the time against Russia. So the Russians were fighting various countries, nations, and it's always been the same common denominator, the same nation that was, or sometimes two, that were promoting and supporting these guys against Russia. Like in Ukraine, you have Great Britain. It's exactly who this gentleman is talking about. So I don't want to waste your time. So I'm going to go and first name this gentleman, Vladimir Medinsky, this guy right here. And he is a Russian politician, political scientist, and historian who currently serves as an aide to President Vladimir Putin. Previously, he has served as the Minister of Culture. All right, so this is the interview right here. It is in English. They have a translator. This occurred while he was in Istanbul for those negotiations. So you're going to have the translation in English. Please pay attention to who was behind many supporting the enemies of Russia, and the fact that you don't need to have a complete ceasefire first and then to negotiate after the ceasefire is implemented. So let me start this. Ready, set, and go.
It is a folder that you had during the negotiations, isn't it? Yes. There were some quotes and notes. We saw you open it multiple times. Yes, it was a key topic because we are considering the talks as the resumption of the Istanbul process. So it was important to reiterate what we agreed on in Gomel back at the end of February 2022, and how all this would have ended had Ukraine agreed to peace at the end of February. They did not agree. They were dragging their feet, and after that the next stage of agreements was in Istanbul. It was slightly more demanding to the situation on the ground than the one in Gomel. However, unfortunately, the Istanbul process was disrupted with the direct intervention of the West, and we remember previous cases of similar interventions and what they led to. Let me remind you of a difficult case. For example, there were many Russian-Turkish wars. And as a result of one of these wars, which was caused by a major conflict in the Balkans in the 1870s, we did agree with Turkey, and this agreement aligned with the interests of the new Balkan states, which gained independence, autonomy, and so on. But the West intervened. A Congress was held in Berlin, which decided that the agreements between Russia and Turkey, based on the Treaty of San Stefano, could be improved. What did the West's improvement of the bilateral agreements lead to? To more Balkan wars in 1912 to 1913, and eventually, the unsettled issues in the Balkans resulted in World War I. A lot of people say that there should be a truce first, and that it was always the case. 30 days without any preconditions? 30 days, 60 days, no matter. First a truce, then peace negotiations. That's what people who don't know history at all say. As a rule, always, as Napoleon said, war and negotiation proceed simultaneously. I'll remind you of bad examples, actually. The Vietnam War. During all 15 years of hostilities between the U.S. and Vietnam, negotiations continued. The Korean War. Negotiations continued throughout the course of fighting. Take the 20th century once again, the Soviet-Finnish War. Indeed, history repeats itself in a surprising way. Stalin proposes a truce in Finland. Peace agreement, in other words. The British and French instigated. You cannot agree with the Soviets. You cannot sign peace. We will provide you with military assistance. Volunteer expeditionary units from England and France will be deployed. Certainly, no one was... They didn't have time. Fight the Russians to the last Finn. Then peace negotiations take place along the course of fighting and ultimately conclude. Then peace is signed and hostilities end. What's my point? Historically, war and negotiation always proceed simultaneously. Perhaps the most illustrative and enlightening example is the sculpture of Emperor Peter the Great is in the embassy. The Great Northern War with Sweden, after which Sweden lost its status as a great power forever and the Russian Empire became a great power. The Great Northern War with Sweden lasted 21 years. But only a few years after beginning, Peter the Great proposed peace to the Swedes. He said, "We don't actually need anything. We have access to the Baltic Sea, St. Petersburg, small buffer zones around it, and that's it." Historically, these are Russian lands, because the entire Leningrad region, most of Karelia, these are all lands that were once under the jurisdiction of the Novgorod Republic and were taken by Sweden piece by piece during the rule of Ivan the Terrible. We know that all these are our native lands, but we don't even ask them back. We don't need much. Give us freedom and access to the sea. Russia cannot live without access to the sea. Give us St. Petersburg and its surroundings, and the war will be over. Security guarantees. What do the Swedes say? They said no, we will fight to the last Swede. Charles XII continues the crazy war, despite recurring peace offers from Peter the Great. However, an interesting fact, who do you think was backing Charles XII? England and France. They've been funding Sweden nonstop. Eventually, we agree to peace talks. And so, the Congress of Åland begins in 1718. Direct peace talks between Russia and Sweden begin on Åland and last for a long time. England and France insist. No negotiations, and it is better to negotiate via mediators, via us, as it's favorable for them when two major powers fight. As a result, these peace talks failed, and only in 1721, 21 years after the beginning of the war, Sweden nevertheless signed a peace agreement in Nystad. The Swedes lost not only St. Petersburg and its surroundings, but most of Karelia, the Leningrad region, the Baltic region, of course St. Petersburg. But most importantly, Sweden lost its status as a great European power for good. If before the war the area of Sweden was 1 million square kilometers, equal to twice the size of France, and the Baltic Sea was the Swedish inner sea, then at the end of the Great Northern War it lost its lands in northern Germany, the Baltic region, and much more. And in the end, it would lose Finland as well. But it is remarkable how our history repeats itself. It is even beyond understanding. 21 is quite an intimidating number. Time used to go slowly. Now it passes much faster. But you see, Otto von Bismarck, who served as ambassador to St. Petersburg for many years, was fluent in Russian, and in general sense and understood Russia, realized a common interest between Russia and Germany, said, "Never try to deceive the Russians or steal anything from them, because time will pass and Russians will always come for what's theirs sooner or later. The Russians will always come for what's theirs."
So the Russians will always come for what's theirs. That's one. The second one, did you see all these examples that he provided where Russia was at war? He gave the example of what? He gave the example of the Turks, then he gave the example with the Finns, then he gave the example with the Swedes. And he said, each and every time we didn't ask for much. But what happened? What is going on here? What happened? These guys did not want to stop the war because the backers of various countries Tell them we're gonna help you fight until the end of your people. The Russians eventually did what they did. I don't think the war with Finland was a success, if I remember correctly. To a certain extent was, because I think the Russians got some territory, but with, not the Russians, I'm sorry, the Soviets, my mistake, got some territories, and but with big sacrifice. So that's one. We're gonna come back and get even more than we asked for. So Ukraine, with the Minsk agreements, the Russians asked for something. That was, we want some autonomy for the Luhansk, Donetsk. And that was agreed in the Minsk Agreement 1 and 2, with the guarantors being France and Germany. The same guarantors now they want to be after the peace process ends in Ukraine. They want to be the guarantors again. No, you won't. First, you're part of NATO, which is a no-no. Secondly, you showed your true colors after Minsk Agreement 2. So now the Russians are saying, when we told you in Minsk Agreement 2, just this, some kind of autonomy for those within Ukraine. Those guys came and told you, no, we're going to help you fight these guys. So then you fought, and now you're going to lose much more. Good job. Thank your masters. So the same, that's his example. History is a very good teacher for life. You know, you make patterns, and then you come and say, look, this is the same origin, the same people, the same country, and 3 examples that you lost. We wanted to take this, and you lost eventually this. And the same thing will happen in Ukraine, unfortunately. And here it is. It's very interesting when you find people like this just to put together a short, not that narrative, how do you call it? Shortened version of the history with examples. And then you can immediately make a pattern and find out who's who, what's what. Here it is, my friends. Yes, peace and peace negotiations could be conducted simultaneously as the war goes. I mean, that was imbecilic from the get-go. But the baboons here, they cling to that. That's why I said, what's the difference between a ceasefire of 30 days or 29 days? Or 31 days? Or 60 days? Or what is the magic 30 days? Anyway, they just want something else, and the Russians do not fall for that. As Stephen Cohen said, as a Jewish scholar that I like very much, he died in, I think, 2022 or 2021. He said that the Russians are planning their foreign policy in centuries, whereas the Americans, the Western democracies, are planning in election cycles. So 4 years. That's how far they see ahead of them. And the Russians are planning for centuries, looking back and learning from centuries. All right, thank you very much for being with me again today. Stay strong, stay smart, look for the truth, and be just.